The topic that we'll be discussing is on adopting future technologies and innovation for social and economic transformation. My first question will go to, let me start with the ladies. Ladies first. Yes. Oh, great. So, Miss Aneth, so my first question will be based on what we've watched and all the discussion that have been going on since morning. So what do you think? Is it possible to lead in technological innovation and anticipate the needs and experiences of the future with a positive social and economic impact? This as coming from UNCDF. I believe you're so much engaged in policy frameworks and guidelines to really promote technological innovation. So what do you think about us taking a lead in technological innovation?
My name is Aneth Kasebele. I am a policy advisor at UNCDF. And thank you for the question. And in response to that question, I think we do believe as UNCDF on the power of digital and technology to transform lives. And this is why our strategy is really looking at how we support different economies in countries that we work as they adopt digital innovation or they transform their economy into the digital. And we do believe there is great power in it for providing essentially opportunities for young people. Particularly, we see opportunities in how you could digitize some of the SMEs. We believe in a lot of these markets, small businesses are engine of the economy, and digitizing these type of businesses could also bring additional opportunities and additional employment to people. So we are really looking to engage, and this is why even for Tanzania in particular, we have been engaging with different stakeholders, particularly in the financial sector, because historically UNCDF has been focusing more on how to include people into the digital system to be able to transact. I remember, I think there was a certain speaker, I think Firas, who had kind of like highlighted how payments can be foundational for digital transaction. And we do believe in that. And that's why most of our work has been historically around that. And for Tanzania, we are looking at the fintech ecosystem and how do we facilitate fintech growth within the country, looking at how do we support them to navigate the legal and regulatory frameworks. How do we support this partnership with existing or incumbent players, so the banks and MNOs, as well as innovation in general, because we do believe that the future of works is really highly on technology, and how do we get young people to get into that space to sort of like avoid the situation of jobless economic growth. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Aneth. Just to add to that, so how far do you think as a country we have been able to achieve?
For Tanzania, we have achieved so much, I would say. I mean, again, I'll draw examples in the sector that I'm familiar with, which is the financial sector. I think all of us have seen how mobile money have transformed our lives. Even if you don't, I think in any given day, one of us is engaging on digital transaction. It has made it much, much easier, because before then, probably you would have wasted a lot of time trying to do a transaction. If I needed to send something, let's say to Abdi or to anybody outside of Dar, there will be a lot of time wastage that goes into it. But now, this particular innovation has improved efficiency on how we run our day-to-day things. So we see the potential for, like, could we imagine other sectors that could have gone through a similar transformation? This is an example in financial sector, but we could also see it in education, for instance. We could see it in health and how this can improve productivity within the country. And I think with growth in productivities, we are seeing a replication of it in how it transformed the economy.
Dr. Ntimi, thank you. So my second question would be, what are the latest trends and innovative strategies to take advantage of the opportunities that digital disruption is creating to our social and economic environment?
Thank you. I'm Dr. Ntimi Mtawa, come from Tumaini University, the Salaam College. I am a higher education researcher,
Yes.
So kind of you nailed the question spot on. I think one of the issues that perhaps since morning I was trying to think about, and I felt like it never really came out strongly, the issue of skills. If you want to be innovative, you want to harness or tap into emerging technologies to transform society, transform individual life, you have to have skills. And I think if we don't pay attention to that, to those skills needed, then we may be, technology could actually work against the transformation we're talking about. And so how do we do that? And I like since morning we talk about the partnership, and who are these key sector involved? Who are these key stakeholders? How do we get them? How do we know them? Do we understand what are they doing? What are their expectations? And how do we manage those differences, those expectations? How do we manage those tension among those key stakeholders? So I think we need to be moving into that discussion in terms of how do we come together to be really able to develop, to engage in skill development, but also to engage in, especially for youth, educated and not educated. How do we get those skills cultivated into them? So for me, that's number one issue. But number two is it's a question I've been asking myself. These emerging technologies are coming to us. We can't run away from them. Now, are we going to be to jump into this bandwagon of praising them, or are we going to be part of contributor to innovating our own as well? And how do we do that? And I think that's where also research institutions, education institutions come into play. Investment into that, and I'm happy that the COSTECH director is here. How much are we putting into research? How much are we putting into innovation? Is it enough? Can you take us to that level we want to go? So I think those are strategies that we need to begin to not only talk about, but also act upon.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ntimi. Just a follow-up question from your contribution. Do you think our education system currently is really positioning itself? Because from Dr. Kamara, is like, we're not reimagining the future, where we have to start now, because these technologies are already existing, they're already affecting and impacting our social and economic lives. So do you think our education system is prepping the future generation? And just to add to that, there are a number of stakeholders when it looks like, when we look at the digital transformation, it's impacting every industry right now. Yes, with telcos, we started with mobile money and mobile payments, now going to digital payments and all that. So looking onto the education system and also the stakeholders, what do you advise, because I believe there are a number of stakeholders here that we can do so that we can all move in alignment? How do we collaborate? How do we make sure that we are, as we are in the technology age right now, how do we speak of our tomorrow, speak about the next hour? What do you think?
Without underestimating the value of the humanities, I think we need to think about the STEM programs, science, engineering, mathematics. We can't run away from that. Those are key component. And the question is our education system across primary, elementary, higher education institution, are they really ready to train young people with key skills in STEM programs? I mean, that's a key skills that we need to be activating our young people, because you can't, you're not going to be able to survive in this world of technology if you're lacking some of those skills. They're key skills that we need to be focusing on. But then I'm not so sure whether our education system is ready to invest so much into STEM programs, which are very key. I don't know. Are they ready to do that? Do we have young people who have those? If we do, can we learn from those experiences in terms of trying to develop different kind of strategy. Coming to the second question, or part two of your question, I think it's a question of how do we develop a framework that is multi-stakeholder framework that can bring all these different kind of stakeholders together. Private sector, public sector, how do we manage that framework? And at what point should be the discussion should be at what point? This level or to even higher level? So I think that's where I think the next move should be.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ntimi. I will come back to you because it's an interesting part of this discussion, looking at the youth and the future. To you, Abdi. So will these technologies create flexible and customer-oriented productive end processes, like with the new technologies future we're looking at?
Thank you very much. And, you know, as ABSA, we've been very interested in this field of innovation, working with startups, working with the ecosystem as a whole for a long time, both at the group level in South Africa, but also in the different countries. I remember a few years ago, I was working in Kenya when the Global Entrepreneurship Summit was held there and President Obama visited. And I remember ABSA played a very big role in that event as well. And in the time that I've been here in Tanzania, we've done quite a bit in the startup ecosystem. And you know, one of the interesting innovations, just a recent example, which Sam, who is there with his team, did, is to transform the way we do the queuing system in the branch using WhatsApp. So it's about connecting the dots. There is no new innovation there. WhatsApp has always been there. We've always used this ticketing system where you pick something from the door, and we decided to use WhatsApp and the phone system in a way that is totally paperless. And the firm that is doing it for us is Tanzanian firm, young people born, educated in this country. And we are likely to roll that solution out to the whole of Africa for ABSA. So it's something that interests me very much. And when John was saying it's an exciting time for Africa, I could really feel that. It's an exciting time. We're at a position where, you know, it's a tipping point where the amount of change that is happening in the ecosystem is reaching that point where it will have real impact, not just in the financial system. And I know we are biased, me and Azampe, Firaz, and others who are in the payments ecosystem. It's not just payments. This innovation and development is far wider, and it's happening in agriculture. It's happening in the medical field. You know, doctors are now using more technology, AI-enabled decision-making by doctors that reduces the error rates. And I saw a solution in Nigeria called CardioPad or something like that, where they remotely diagnose, you know, cardiological issues in the medical field. So it's happening all over. There is a young person in Nigeria who started this thing called Refugees First, which is an app that allows refugees all over the world to register and track their families who are lost in the world and be able to find them, etc. So the fintech and the payment side, of course, is a very, very important one, because the growth in Africa in the coming few years will be driven by trade, by economic growth. And without fintech innovation, it becomes very difficult. And that's where really we come in. And it's a partnership across the board between established financial players like ABSA, and we've been there for a long time, but we can't do it alone. You know, we have legacy systems. We've invested in what you call core banking systems, etc. But the new players like Azampe and others come in at another layer. And I really like the way Firaz actually gave that pyramid in terms of how it sits on top of how it's stacked, because unless you address each of those from an innovation perspective, it becomes very difficult. And that's why I really love this panel, because this panel is a reflection of how many people need to work together for innovation to work. You know, Tom Peters said, you can invent alone, but you can never innovate alone. Innovation is a team effort. And it's something that, we really have to do together. So I feel strongly about it. It's a personal passion for me. And I feel that Africa is at a point where we are really getting into exciting territory.
Oh, thank you so much, Abdi. I just love what you said, and coming from the banking industry, like you're the incumbent players when it comes to financial services provision. And I want to hear from your own perspective as a customer. Right now, there are a lot of products in terms of promoting financial inclusion. There are a lot of microservices coming on board in terms of providing loans, credit, and all that. So my question will be like speaking like from because I know you serve customers, so I want you to speak on behalf of customers who are supposed to adopt to these new technologies when it comes to financial services provision, because that's what I usually say, like our social and economic lives impacts our financial position in the society. So what do you think will drive adoption? What needs to be done to drive adoption of new technologies, especially to the users or end users of all these financial, when it comes to financial services?
Yeah. So that goes to the whole issue of financial inclusion. Unfortunately for us in Tanzania, it's one of the few countries that actually has a framework, an established framework driven by the central bank, monitored by the central bank, that tracks how well we are doing on that journey of financial inclusion. Now, financial inclusion is about how many banking products or financial services people in the population enjoy, and it's tracked as a percentage. When you include payment services and all the mobile solutions, the percentages are high, in the high 50s. However, when you dig deeper into that and you say how widespread is the use of financial products such as loans, deposit products, investment products, insurance products, etc., the percentage for Tanzania, like many other African countries, is still low. And that is what we have to drive together. What are the drivers? Number one is about the quality of the product. You can sell all you want, but if the client doesn't feel there is value for them, even at that grassroots level, then you have a problem. So good quality products. The other one is access, which is the digital access, the innovation in digital, that you allow the customer to access it through their mobile, through USSD for people who have the feature phones, etc. So make sure access is widespread. There is also awareness and cultural issues that you have to deal with. And I think example was given of these customers who had to be trained, retrained. But at the end of the day, once people cross that line into a digital resident, it becomes much easier to deal with them and add more products, over time. Pricing and affordability is another critical one that as a banking sector, we are continue, to work on, so that you are continuously expanding the field. But the other one is the partnership. The bank will not be able to do everything, but we need to allow for a plug-in kind of system where a lot of other players and innovators, like people in this room, can make their products and then plug in. And in that way, you cover a lot more customers. Recently we launched as ABSA a product with TIGO. I saw there is a representative of TIGO in the room, where we are doing those micro lendings. From September we've started, and we are already in the thousands in terms of customers that we are reaching through that product. It's digital, it's low cost, and it allows people who have never been exposed to ABSA before to access some of the funds that are available. So it's a journey and it continues.
Brilliant, brilliant. I love the answer, really. And it's kind of bringing the whole collaboration and participation, partnerships into play in the industry. So my next speaker, Ajay. I know you play a big role when it comes to fintech startups and various startups accelerator. I think from everything that has been shared from the research and development, from policymakers to the incubate like ABSA into the whole digital ecosystem. So my question would be, how will the development of new technologies and innovation affect consumers in the future? Please share your perspective in terms of your experience in startup and accelerator programs.
If you want to be there and you want to see what 2040 looks like, you got to be here in 2021 and you build for that. Without that, 2040 is probably going to become 2060, 2080, and it just continues. And there's going to be no development. Likewise, I also go on to another point which John made, which was around USSD. India, for the longest time, where I come from, for the longest time were looked upon as the back office of the world. There was a lot of offshoring done. There was a lot of software development done. But today, the biggest export of technology, which is expected, and this is turning out to be kind of a fintech conference, because again, I'm going on to a fintech area. The biggest software export touted to go out of India is UPI, which is the Unified Payment Interface, which was not built by a startup. The policy and the product was built by the government. So when government gets involved, not just in policy making, but also building products, the acceptability by itself kind of goes up several notches. And when you're kind of breaking barriers or when you're enabling access, it kind of makes it even more bigger. So coming to the question now, because I was thinking about the Wakanda point for a while and I had to make it, but coming to your question, and this again, I mean, I would kind of lean on to some of the points that earlier speakers made. I guess the first, the keynote which Firas made and the panel which ran, I think enterprise amongst everyone, government, yes, academia, yes, enterprise has a massive role to play in reshaping future of any economy, because guess what? Anyways, it is enterprise which drives the economic engine. But at the same time, enterprise which with a growth mindset or which thinks innovation first or thinks future first, I think those are the ones which are not only going to do good for themselves, but around them, there's a whole new ecosystem that's going to develop. And it's in general going to make the overall economy think innovation first. Because yes, I mean, like the point that Jumani made, I mean, the Boda Boda economy might be a 290 billion shilling economy. Fine, great. Yes, there are a lot of people getting employed. But when you're talking of a population explosion of the sort that exists, enterprises of today can never fulfill the kind of graduates, postgraduates that come out of the system. You got to kind of support enterprise of the future, either by, so I mean, Azam Pay is a great example again, right? I mean, as a CPG company, to think in that direction. I mean, you're talking distribution, you're talking so many things, but on top of that, to build a rail of, say, fintech or payments, it was not thought of maybe 50 years back or 30 years back, but today, those are the enterprises of the future which are thinking in a very different tangent from what their core business is, but still they stitch it back to their core business. But in doing so, they're not only kind of enabling the existing customers, partners, whatnot, but creating altogether new businesses, probably creating those micro entrepreneurs. There are so many other things or other directions that such enterprises can take. And in that way, the impact that gets created or economic development that gets created is far more wider than any traditional enterprise. Coming to point like accelerators and startups, I guess if you went back 5 years, there were a lot of enterprises that were thinking of a startup accelerator or an innovation lab as something which looked fancy and cool, like a Google office. They would put in the yellow, blue, green, red, whatnot, but they would not really be able to add value to any startup because the enterprises themselves are not prepared. But today, if you look at many of them across the world who are creating these open innovation programs, accelerators, whatnot, it is not about creating a 5,000 square feet space. It is kind of getting more organized within the enterprise, the siloed data, bringing it together, creating probably structures on top of which you can actually plug and play. Creating that architecture, creating that framework is not easy. I mean, even like when someone spoke about NMB, probably it took them a couple of years to kind of roll out a sandbox. But it requires not just having a feeling of fear of missing out, but more importantly, putting the right kind of resources in place to kind of build something right, which actually is usable. Because you build an infrastructure which no one can use, there's no point. And it's just like civic infrastructure. A lot of times projects kind of get rolled out, things get built, but which no one is going to use. I mean, that's just taxpayers' money kind of going to the drain, to the dogs, wherever. And similarly, if you're talking of a technology first world and you're building an infrastructure, build something which people can plug and play into. I think a lot of enterprises which are doing accelerators today, digital innovation labs today, they probably might be taking a little bit more time because it's not a marketing spend, but they have to get the right internal resources in place and build something which genuinely, if there is someone outside who is a smart kid off the streets building something, can plug into and create value. And in that way, it's a win-win for everyone. So I think enterprise is very, very critical in this overall scheme of things. When we talk of startups, we talk of innovation, we talk of economic engine, and it can be done in multiple ways. But having the right set of, it's not a function of money, it's not a function of even time, it's a function of getting the right people in order and people in place. Once you do that, you can kind of put things out of it, and that will create long-term value for everyone.
Looking at these new technologies, what's your take? What do you think can be done based on the role you are playing today in the market? What do you think can be done? What do you think should be the direction? Just give us an insight of what you think. Maybe we can start from Dr.
Thank you. Sorry. I think we need champions, people who can take a lead, champions who can champion this kind of conversation, number one, but also champion who can champion the enactment of programs and strategies in place. Because we often like talking, but when it comes to putting things into practice, is a problem. So we need champions who really are willing to, to take up these issues, whether to the government or to, to the different kind of conversation, not just a simple conversation, very critical conversation. But also we need to, I can't emphasize enough the issue of partnership. I think we are seated here, and I would think, while I was seated, I think like an academic, while I was seated here, I was thinking, I need to engage in Tumaini. We need to write a paper. What kind of, how do we bring different kind of partners together to drive this agenda? So I think we need to come up with something, whether it's a brief, policy brief or working paper, I don't know. But I think we need that kind of engagement from different kind of sectors, different kind of stakeholders, and agree what is it that we want to get out of it. I think that would be critical.
Just to add to my question, so from the education sector, because you're a stakeholder in all this, what do you think as the, because you say like we need champions. So I want you to talk about the champions in the education sector. Like, what do you think needs to be done? Yeah.
Universities need to change as well.
Yes.
Otherwise, it was made irrelevant. They are very much strong, very much resistant institution. It's like turning a grave. They don't want to change, but they need to change in terms of curriculum, in terms of programs, in terms of extracurricular programs. How do we train our graduates? Are they ready? When they go out there, do they have necessary skills? So I think also institutions, actually not only university, across the system, we need to change. How do we train our students, our learners? But what kind of environment are we creating for them? Is it conducive? So also issue of digital divide, are we looking at it? Who's going to be left out? So we also need to look at those issues.
I think there should be more of internship programs, and companies should really open up for that. Thank you so much, Dr. Ntimi. Yes, Ajay, so let's hear from you.
So I think going to the point that Adenian Labs made, I think, so last year we did a fairly large summit focus on AI as a vertical. And we did a fair bit of research into that. And my colleague Jagrati, who's there, I think she can mingle around, meet people. But if you look at Fortune 500 companies, 2030, it is said that amongst all Fortune 500 companies, at least 70% of all business functions are going to be driven by AI. And you're left with like 9 years for that. And I don't think the adoption of AI is that deep in many organizations, because you need to kind of really be prepared. Not just, like I said, within the organization, but also the availability of talent. So building industry-ready talent is a massive, massive opportunity, because when we talk of population explosion and what some of the points that Jumane was making, I mean, say Food Sasa or whatever, I mean, all of these companies, a lot of this is going to be based or built on top of what the consumer behavior is like. And just rolling out, I mean, everyone is thinking of just rolling out apps or websites and whatnot, but if you do not have the infrastructure, or if you do not have the engineering capability to kind of mine the kind of data that comes out and build intelligence layers on top of it, only that is going to allow you to kind of cater to those customers, that audience with intelligent products, right? So that is one. Second, if you look at the whole innovation economy, I think it's more of a collaboration economy rather than a competitive economy. So one needs to, because at the end of the day, whoever runs innovation programs, incubators, accelerators, VCs, end of the day, it's a person who runs it, person or a team of people. And everyone brings very, very unique skill sets as individuals. No two people are alike. No two people think alike. No two people have the same network of people. So the more collaboration that is possible, and I would like to say thank you to Tumaini, because it was fairly last minute that he got me onto this panel as well. And Sahara has been a good friend and partner with whom we have been looking at working together in different ways. I think that is the kind of mindset which talks about growth mindset, right? Rather than looking at someone as threat, competition, whatever. I mean, in a lot of emerging markets, even in India, it is the same. Everyone is competing neck and neck with everyone, rather than thinking that how can two people come together and create kind of joint value. How can you kind of create a stronger collaboration or partnership which will allow you to address different challenges. So I think that's when it comes to capacity of innovation hubs, incubators, accelerators, I think there is a huge opportunity to have a strong, cohesive kind of an ecosystem, a peer network where each one kind of feeds off the other, because the market is big enough. If you talk of just Tanzania, you're talking 60 million people. You talk of East Africa, you're talking 300 million people. You look at the continent, you're talking 1 billion plus people. So the opportunity is fairly large. So I think my two takeaways would be, one, how AI can define or help reimagine the future in several ways, both from an economic standpoint and from social. Because if you look at a lot of programs that IBM and Microsoft are funding in AI, whether it is got to do with displaced people, the refugees, climate action, a lot of it is Africa-centric. And the second one would be, how can we collaborate more as an ecosystem to create joint economic value? So,
thank you so much, Ajay. I really love that. And I think that's a call also for a lot of mentorships and coaching to startups and small business that really want to scale. Since there's partnership, collaboration coming inside that. Thank you so much for that. Coming to Aneth, so what do you think?
So as we design these products and solution to ensure that nobody is left behind. So how do we emphasize on training or empowering different individuals with digital skills for them to be able to engage equally? But the other element that I would like to emphasize, and I think we had some people from the government here, is around the consumer protection related issue. So as data, a lot of information is migrating into the digital space. And I think it's important we think about privacy and data protection and having the legal framework around that. Because as transaction, let's say, if we think of e-commerce, most of us, when we go to the market, you buy, you get your product right there and then. But now, as these transactions are moving into the digital space, there is issue of trust. If there is no any legal framework, me as a consumer, it becomes difficult to adopt that specific type of innovation because I'm not exactly sure, will I get something that I expect to get? And if it's not matching what I had expected, either in terms of quality or whatnot, what is there to protect me? Can I return it? Can I report this person somewhere? So all these things that I think it should be part of the conversation. It shouldn't happen in isolation. So as innovators out there are building this solution, what is happening from the legal and regulatory framework to ensure that adoption happens smoothly and consumers are actually protected? Because if you are following the news, all of us have been hearing about Facebook and data abuse and all of that. So we have already been shown what could possibly go wrong. So how do we prepare to ensure that as consumers adopt and engage in these digital spaces are protected? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aneth. To you, Mr. Abdi.
I think for me, I'll repeat the issue of partnership and collaboration without going into detail. That has been that point has really been made. And to thank Sahara, we've partnered with them. We've partnered with Startup Reseau as well and many others. And I think that is a space you will see ABSA continuously participating in as we go forward. The other thing I just wanted to mention in closing is the point of how do we create value together? So it's not just about, and this is more a message for the startups and the young people who are coming up with all the ideas, there is us sitting with the client and sitting with real problems. And there is the startup community out there trying to work and get stuff done. How do we work together to deliver real value? Because it's not just the app is part of it, but working with us in a real situation to understand a real problem and come up with a solution. Uber have a wonderful app, but it's not just the app. It's the service model behind it. It's the data behind it. It's the fact that the car is always a few minutes away, as opposed to the guys, Zamani, we used to call them, he tells you niko hapa kwa mataa, but he's in Ubungo. There is no way you can check on the map, etc. How do we work together in a way that delivers true value for the customer? I think the other thing is around regulation. And as I was saying, in Tanzania, certainly, and also in this region, the regulators and the policymakers has actually moved along with the innovation. If you look at the licensing processes from both the central banks, communication authorities, for some of the telco products, the payment products that are there, it's actually good. It's a reasonable regulation. During COVID, I remember at some point we were meeting the BOT almost every 2 weeks to discuss solutions at very senior level, director level, to say, how can we do this differently? And I've worked in many markets. I've never seen that anywhere, and it's truly impressive. So it's something that will be helpful as we move forward as well. So how do we work together? How do we create real value for the customer? And the possibilities are unlimited, and we're very excited as ABSA about the way forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to all the panelists. I believe this discussion has opened up our minds to more questions, to progressive discussions, and most important, to execution of what is really what we're really looking forward in the future. I really want to thank all of you for your answers, for your comments. Thank you so much.